It's like the last minute's always the longest. Okay, we can start the City of North St. Paul City Council workshop for August 18th. Mary, if you would take roll.
Councilmember Thorson.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Walzak.
Here.
Councilmember Sonic.
Here.
Mayor Furlong.
Here. Quorum is present. At this time, motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
Moved by Councilmember Walzak,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Sonic. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Nay for no. Mary, if you could take roll.
Councilmember Thorson.
Aye. But
Councilmember Peterson.
just before we go on, I just wanted to comment that we do have some time to discuss the budget. I know there's a couple items that were added here, but I think it's important that we continue on with that discussion. So if we can keep the rolling forward, appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Peterson.
Aye.
Councilmember Walzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Sonic.
Aye.
Mayor Furlong.
Aye. The agenda is adopted. We have a few topics here, and I'll just quick turn it over to Scott. Try to
Mayor,
move.
Council, thank you. And as you've seen, we do have the third item that we added to this agenda this evening, and that was for Morgan Dolly to give us a quick update on the Bruggeman project. We've moved that along, expedited it ahead, as we have a letter of intent that is actually set to expire today. So staff and planning commission had held a special planning commission last week on Thursday to hear the project, and then move it ahead quickly for this council meeting to take some sort of action with that. And that approval was contingent upon, from the planning commission, on receiving a lot of engineering information and other information. And I'll just turn it over to Morgan and let him give a quick update on it prior to the council meeting. We also have Aaron on tap right after that to give an update on Livable Communities Act on a potential grant opportunity. So we want to move both of those along quickly, as we do want to talk about budget this evening also before the council meeting. So with that, I'll roll it over to Morgan for a quick update.
Thanks, Scott. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and I'll be brief. I know we don't have a lot of time here, but Scott and I thought it was important to kind of give you a little bit of the background. As Scott mentioned, with the special planning commission meeting on Thursday night, the planning commission moved the 17th in Delaware PUD and final plat, which was both a preliminary and final together at the request of the applicant, with a recommendation with conditions, a lot of conditions, to this evening's regular city council meeting for consideration on approval. And we had some pre-application meetings. Aaron and I both did with the applicant, Paul Brueggemann, and his engineer from AMI Engineering, Karen Keenan, dating back to, I believe, July 21st was the first date of contact in terms of them kind of requesting information on how can we get through the process, what's required, et cetera, et cetera. At that time, on July 21st, they were considering and ultimately wound up moving forward with, again, that combined preliminary final at the same time, building off of the concept that was conceptually approved back in, I believe, January or February of 2020. And so the applicant had been sitting on this approved concept for some time, had made the decision late July to move forward with at least 2 Zoom meetings and many, many emails. Aaron and I helped provide some information in terms of, what exactly are we going to be looking for? What do we need, and at what times in the process to be able to contemplate, a successful or a staff recommendation for approval, even conditional approval, right? And we were very clear with the applicant. I even made a couple of exceptions in terms of not allowing or not requiring upfront things like stormwater management or drainage full, calculations and analysis prior to planning commission. But I was very clear that I needed all of that stuff to be in line and to the point where at least I could, upon review, feel comfortable, even if there were a few things that needed to be cleaned up, recommending to planning commission first and then ultimately city council conditional approval of the development. And so planning commission was Thursday night. And as I mentioned, we didn't require the full stormwater analysis. But as the plans started to come in for that, and we even kind of made some exceptions, Aaron and I, in terms of, trying to get that packet together at the last minute. I'm sure Olivia and Aaron and everybody was scrambling, trying to get all their, submitted plans and things together. Reviewing all of the standing prior engineering comments and conditions that were placed on the past concepts that were moved through to make sure that those things were addressed. I found at that time that they really had not addressed many of those outstanding items. And I represented as such in the Planning Commission staff report. It was made mention at the Planning Commission meeting that they had a lot of work to do. At that meeting, the applicant's engineer stated something along the lines that, revisions to these plans and the necessary remaining items would be ready on Friday or at the latest noon on Monday. That's this week, Monday, for the regular city council meeting here tonight. Yesterday came and went. I confirmed at City Hall through Olivia and Cynthia that they hadn't received anything separately from Aaron and I. So as of the end of the day yesterday, we still hadn't received anything really in terms of revised submittals. Those did come in this morning at about 8:30. And I will be honest with City Council, and staff knows this, there was just no time to go through what they had given us. And I also noted at that time for the applicant that the stormwater management design calculations, their HydroCAD model, the things that we would typically see to be able to support basically the design for their stormwater, to make sure that it's adequately sized, that the easements are in the right place, that the property lines are in the right place for the ponding, that sort of thing. We don't have that at this time. And in fact, at this time right now at 5:05, I don't believe we still have that. So that puts us staff in a position where I can't adequately recommend to City Council a conditional approval based on engineering that supports the development. If there were things that were close enough that I felt comfortable knowing that those could be worked out between now and a building permit, for example, or whenever, grading might start on the site, I certainly would do that. That's not uncommon. But I'm missing significant chunks, I think, that are important and substantive, and puts us in a position where we have a planning commission recommendation for conditional approval, but we don't have the ability to say that what they have from a design, from an engineering standpoint, from a grading and drainage. And as you may recall, with some of the preliminary concepts, there were some significant concerns about all of those things. And I think it's
Morgan,
fair.
can I jump in?
Yep.
And out of respect for time, I think basically what you're saying is they turn everything in on the nth hour. Staff does not have time to review it. So the council needs to either table that item at the meeting tonight and either consider terminating all this or granting him another 30-day extension to give us proper time to review and ensure that what he needs to get in gets turned in. Is that
Up to the city council in terms of what way to go with this, but yeah, we don't have a viable package right now.
Can I ask a question on that? Aaron, where are we at on the review process from a timing standpoint on the 60 and 120?
We had extended the deadline several times, and the last time we extended it was to today. So if we table it, then we're going to have to do something tonight to formally extend that.
Well, yeah, but we need So since we're past what the statute gives us to contemplate it, if we want to extend it, we need his agreement to that.
Correct. Yes.
And we would need that tonight, or we're in a position where we got to deny it.
Right.
And we don't have that. He didn't submit a request for extension with all this that he just turned in this morning.
Not that I'm aware of.
I haven't seen that. I haven't spoken to him since the planning commission meeting, so I don't know what his updated plans are, but no, nothing in writing.
And that is correct, that the letter of intent that was reissued and extended, he and I did that back on April 17th. And that was the letter of intent, and also his letter dated April 14th requesting an extension on that, which is correct to be extended through today, Tuesday, August 18th.
So what is your recommendation, Soren? Do you have a recommendation? Soren?
Well, here's my thoughts on it. I don't know if I have a recommendation, but quickly, we've spent 3 years on this parcel.
Yep.
He spent 3 years. We've got, it's tied the land up for that amount of time. There's been a lot of missed timelines. We've extended it. We can certainly extend it again if we feel like, look, this is worth continuing to pursue. The problem is, at some point, is this a project that was really viable, or why is it taking so long to move through the process? And I don't know if that's the developer. I don't know if that's the market. I don't know if that's the complexity of the project. But, we're at 3 years at this point, and it just feels like we're pushing and pushing and pushing. There is nothing, if we deny this thing, that prohibits someone from coming back and taking a second look at the project. With that said, I think from the planning, and Aaron, please weigh in, there was a recommendation to move forward on it, but we don't have as much as we need. And I get concerned, candidly, that this is indicative of what this project is going to be like to manage moving forward also, if I'm just blunt with you.
Councilmember Sonic.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit of context from the Planning Commission meeting. To your point, Soren, of, there's been a lot of time. I asked the developer that question at the Planning Commission. I said, you have known what the needs were to move forward with this project, what the conditions were the last time we looked at it, and what he needed to update. Why did he wait till this point? Why are we having to have a special planning commission meeting to review this at the last minute? And his response was, I don't have an answer for that. So it sounds like it was just procrastination. So not having any answer at all, it just sounds like he just didn't care that much. That said, in looking at the plans, I think that the Planning Commission in general really felt this, that what is there now is a good plan. The townhomes look really good. I mean, I think they would fit in that area very nicely, and I think the Planning Commission was generally excited about the potential of having those there. But I too am a little concerned if now, with having been sort of berated at the Planning Commission meeting, not really, but, asking, bluntly, why it was taking him so long, and then to have now this additional time to get more information and still not coming through, it does seem to be indicative of what it might be like to work with him going forward, or what's this going to look like, especially because these aren't going to be sold properties. These are going to be rental properties, right? I believe that was still his intention. So now you've got a person in there that, the city is going to be dealing with for some time, and is not building a good reputation for himself.
I will throw out one other add to that. When I did talk to him today a couple of times, and he said his other concern that we may have to, if this moves ahead, give him an additional extension on construction, because I had, talked about it here that if with this approval, that we look at completing the development agreement and pulling a building permit by October to get this thing moving along so it just doesn't stall again. And he told me today that he would likely need to have that extended potentially into next year because lumber prices are on the increase and he don't know if he can get a contractor to do the work for him or not.
So do we have other options with the property? How long do we want to drag this out? Or do we want to drag it out further than how long we've already dragged it out?
Well, and Scott, maybe you want to talk, I don't want to mix and match too much, I guess, but just the value that the city was giving him on the land. I mean, how long do you keep that kind of deal open?
Yeah, again, a reminder for our letter of intent that's in place. There's no purchase agreement. It was just a letter of intent. But what's spelled out in there is what was laid out 3 years ago. And that's $70,000 purchase price for the property. So, to put it in context, $70,000, that's less than $6,000 per unit. And we know what land costs and lot costs are. So this is really a deal that's there.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I guess, I would be supportive of granting another extension if that's actually what he had presented and asked for at this 9th hour. But absent of that, I agree. It just seemed, I'm sure there's various reasons, and the current economic climate and uncertainty of things going on has to play into it. But at some point, we either need to commit to this and approve it, or say, it just didn't work out and move on. Have changed prior to COVID. It was looking like that, that property sat vacant for such a long time, just like City Hall, just like Anchor Block. And now all this development interest just bam, hit all at once. And, certainly there's other options for that. And, we currently own it as a city. So, we can have further discussion at the council meeting, but I just put out there, if we do have not to approve it, and if we don't approve it, it basically just ends, correct? Everything that's been leading up to this point is just over and void.
Correct.
And if we table it because of these legality issues, it just automatically gets approved, right?
It does, but the issue is he doesn't own the land. So it's a unique circumstance. I don't want to play too fast and loose with that, but.
Sure. So basically, we as a council need to consider the decision here is, do we grant an extension, and then he needs to follow up with that with a letter, right, to fill that issue, because we can't just grant an extension without him requesting it. But
Right.
Because he doesn't have it here, unless he's listening now and filling it out now, I'm gonna run down to City Hall, or we just say we're terminating it and we'll put a plan together with something else. But it's pretty
And he can always come back with that plan.
sure.
He's always potentially could be that person.
And my only concern is if we do something with an extension, that there's, that if this land doesn't continue to be tied up forever, because it was even a greater concern about, I definitely would not want to do a development agreement and purchase agreement and transfer the land. And then they look at maybe doing a building permit next year, and we have no holdover on that. And now that land could sit there undeveloped in somebody else's ownership. So I definitely don't want to go down that path.
Councilmember Walzak.
I wasn't.
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
So my other question was, and I didn't see any indication of this, but I just want to clarify, was there anything that was preventing him to move forward with this project that, he was waiting for the city to get something back? Was this kind of just all on his end, on just kind of,
Yes.
okay, all right.
Councilmember Walzak.
We updated the letter of intent in April, and Planning Commission back in January or February basically gave him a concept approval at that time. And so what he needed to do between now and then is to finalize the engineering and bring it back to Planning Commission for approval, and then council. And here we are today, short of that.
Do we know how much money he's got invested in this?
No, I mean, he's made comment about that, you know, he spent, you know, tens of thousands of dollars and that, but I have no idea what that number actually is.
Okay. Councilmember Walzak?
You know, I guess I just kind of want to go back to what Soren was saying and how we are we looking at what we're going to be dealing with in the future, because if y'all want to go back, Bruggeman was the original company that was set to do the condos down here, and they got halfway through with that and just said, oh, and they just pulled out, just got tired of it, didn't work, they weren't getting what they wanted, and just ended up pulling out, and we ended up having another company come in and build the condos, and they did build the little townhomes that are on First here, but you know, even with their improvements in their drawings, what they're trying to put together and put in now, it has no comparison to the quality of what they did back then. These are certainly okay and passable and acceptable, but it just doesn't feel quite right. And I would have concerns, just as Soren mentioned, about dealing with them because they were so unpredictable at that point in time, and might end up being that way here, you know, especially with Scott saying that now they want to put this off, and well, maybe I'll build next year, and this has gone on for 3 years already. I just, you know, I think if we just kind of end this, and if he is interested and wants to come back and start over, then we can renegotiate a price too.
Is everybody okay if we bring it forward? Recommendation of not accepting it, and I'm assuming that it's gonna be presented. I don't think Aaron's gonna be there tonight. Someone else will be there. Is that
Right.
true?
Yes, I have another meeting, but my colleague Ryan will present the staff report, and Morgan will be there too.
And then the recommendation will be denial at that time.
Our recommendation that you received already was conditional approval, but for all of these engineering items. So I think at the end of the presentation, Morgan's prepared to address that.
Okay.
Yeah, if the council consensus at this time is okay, I can close the presentation with, because we are missing substantial engineering items and clarity and support for their design, that the staff recommendation at this time to council is going to be denial. We did prepare an alternate resolution. I think Mary's got that. I don't know if that's in the packet necessarily, but we do have that resolution prepared.
Okay.
So I can make mention of that, and then, you know, council can certainly ask questions or debate or make the decision from there, if that's okay. Or Scott, I don't know if you got anything else you want to add to that.
No, and because I think we, as we say, we have to take some action today. We've got the letter of intent, we've got the extension for the project, and I mean, there's nothing saying that, you know, he can't come back with another proposal or something else, you know, in the short time coming. I don't think there's anything with the plans that we've received that says he's got to necessarily start the project all over, but so that's on the table, but I think we have to take this action.
Okay, we'll do that. Everybody okay with that? All right. Go ahead, Scott.
Next item, and we'll continue moving along quickly. Erin is going to do a presentation tonight on Livable Communities Act and some project that she's been working on for us. And I'll just turn it over to Erin right away so we can use all the time possible.
All right, and I'll unmute myself so I don't make that mistake. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I will be brief. What I provided for you in your packet is some work that I have been doing with staff to try and assess whether there are some projects in the city that would be a good fit for the Livable Communities Act funding that will be coming up again next year with the Met Council. Even though the applications don't start till next year, there are a few things that we need to do to get ready if we want to apply for that funding. So that's why we're talking about it earlier rather than later. So in talking with Deborah and Scott, a few of the projects or potential things that the city might want to do really centered around the top priority that came out, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say, were help for individual aging homes, or what we call naturally occurring affordable housing in the single family realm, in the single family neighborhoods. And the city could use money to help homeowners rehabilitate those homes, or in some cases demolish and rebuild as affordable housing. Those funds could be used to build on the existing loan program that the HRA already has, and potentially could make those funds available to homeowners as grants instead of loans. There are a lot of houses that are at the end of their life cycle and could use some cash infusion to allow homeowners to stay in those houses. And so there is a grant program, gosh, I forgot what LHIA, Local Housing Incentives Account. I had to take a look at that. Is a match for funding there. So that's part of the Livable Communities Act funding. Another thing we talked about was making money available to rehabilitate some of the aging small apartment buildings that you have already in the city. The buildings on Skillman came up as an example. And that funding could be used for remodeling, modernizing, reusing those buildings, but keeping them affordable. And that same local housing incentives account funding could be used for that purpose as well. And then finally, if we wanted to think about new affordable housing or new apartments or a new housing within a mixed use building, that would match with the Livable Communities Demonstration Account funding that will be available next year. That kind of thing would fit the apartment complex that's been talked about across from City Hall, where we would have some kind of community space or commercial space or coffee shop or something on the first floor, and then residential on the second and third floors. That kind of new development project would be eligible for LCDA funding. So all of those are potential uses for grant money, potential matches that I wanted to bring to your attention. Just kind of see what your thoughts are on what you might want to do. We don't have to decide on any particular affordable housing projects tonight. What we do need to do are a couple of things. What I'm preparing for a future council meeting would be adopting life cycle housing goals. So to be eligible to apply for grant funding next year, the city has to adopt the Met Council's life cycle housing goals. And they have sent those out for each city in the metro. In North St. Paul, there's a goal for affordable units, and those are specifically restricted to those earning up to 80% AMI. So there's a goal for that. And then there's also a goal for life cycle housing, which is not income restricted, but it's more based on the density of the housing than the value of it. The goal for affordable units is 75 to 115 through the end of this year, and then 14 to 25 units in the next decade. Basically, the Anchor View apartments that you've already approved would count towards this. So we don't see that goal being a difficult one to achieve. The life cycle housing goal for the next decade is 100 units. And if you look at our comprehensive plan, we've already planned for more housing units at a density that meets that criteria. So that goal would seem reasonable and compatible with your comprehensive plan. If you want more information on how the Met Council came up with all of those, there's some more information in your packet. And then just a little bit of background on the affordability limits that would apply to a new affordable housing development. These numbers are based on 2019 income information, which is the latest that we have. And in 2019, a family of 4 could earn up to $75,500 and still qualify for affordable housing under the Livable Communities program. And that translates into these rent levels, depending on the percent AMI of the renter. But if we're talking about a family that earns up to this amount, the $75,000, that's the 80% AMI limit. So rents for a 1-bedroom could be up to $14.99 and still qualify as affordable. There's also price guidance for owner-occupied housing, and again, that same family of 4, the price limit for an affordable owner-occupied house would be $254,000. So, so these affordable units that we're talking about are not, you know, the Section 8 type, you know, public housing project that you might be thinking of or have seen in decades past. This is really workforce housing that we're talking about. And for some context, the median household income in 2018 in North St. Paul was $63,100. So, so that gives you some perspective about the folks that are living here and the types of housing that we might need. So yeah, the next steps, sometime before November 15th, we need to adopt those housing goals, which are just the 2 numbers that I presented to you. The city also needs to adopt a fair housing policy, and that has to happen before any application is made. So that's not necessarily right away, but I did attach a sample fair housing policy for you to take a look at. And then next year we will have to do a housing action plan. We don't really know what that entails yet, but the Met Council has promised more information on that later this year. So that's something that we'll look to do next year. So that's all I had. I'd be happy to hear what you think as far as priorities for the money, and if you have any questions or concerns about the life cycle housing goals.
Any questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Thorson.
So is this what's being proposed, like city initiated, like we would build these things, or is this just a developer would come in and then they could apply for these grants because we adopt policy?
Yeah, it's not meant to be city initiated. That would be for a developer similar to the Anchorview Apartments, you know, and so the grant funding could be used to help with that. But no, not city built.
Yep. Aaron, is there any idea on the dollars that are available?
That is a good question. I don't recall what the level of funding was this year, but it was, I know it was in the millions, and that was divided up between those different, there's the, you know, the LHIA, the demonstration account. They also have some funding for transit oriented development and brownfield kind of stuff. So I'll ask what their estimate is for next year. So when we come back to council, I'll have that.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Walzak.
Do we have a comparison, a number? I lost my face.
We can hear you though.
Do we have a comparison for what we already have in affordable housing or low income or all of these numbers, and did that in any way figure into what our requirements are for years to come, these years coming up, that if we already had like if we needed 10% and we already had 20, would that be taken into account, or how does that all?
That's a very good question, and I wish I had a clear answer for you on that. The way the Met Council does the calculations is a bit mysterious. Part of it already occurred when we got our affordable housing goals for the comp plan. And so we've already programmed that, and we have housing policies in place in the comp plan to cover that affordable housing goal. From what I understand, these goals just build from that and get a little bit more specific. You get a range of numbers rather than one single number. The life cycle housing goal, I don't believe that they have done an assessment of exactly where your housing is right now, but I know that when they initially did all of the allocations, they did look at how much growth is projected, for one thing, and then also what the age of the housing stock is. You'll remember in the comp plan, we had a map that showed approximate values of, and so for some context, I've seen the numbers for some other communities, and if it's a suburban community that has not a lot of affordable housing, those numbers are a lot higher. The goals are a lot higher than what you're seeing for North St. Paul. I think the affordable goal in North St. Paul for the 2021 to 2030 decade was only 14 to 25 units, so not too many. The life cycle goal was a little bit more, and again, that's just based on density, but the development trend is such that that's not going to be a problem to meet. But I wish I had a quick and easy answer for that question. I don't.
Thank you, Aaron. Just in the spirit of time here, I think we're going to cut it off here. But we will be updated later on. I think this is a very good presentation and something that we are looking for within the city. I think a lot of developers actually look for this type of something in place because they can get grant dollars and be able to use that for their build out. I don't know if that's true or not, but
well, not only for a larger building that we were talking about, but also help for our existing housing stock to be able to rehab our existing housing stock, and so that people are able to stay in their homes and repurpose our existing stock.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely something we want to move forward with. So, any other questions for Aaron real quick? If anybody's got anything. If not, we'll go ahead and move on to budget.
Okay, very good, Mayor, Council, thank you. And
Thank
again,
you,
and take all of our time, we'll gonna move it over into our Finance Director, Jason Zimmerman, who we've got a few scenarios to go over similarly to what we did before. I know Jason has been working. We're going to have things from the county, and I'll let Tim talk about that. I think some information may have came here right at 4:30, but Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so this evening, kind of picking up where we discussed last week, kind of expanded on the scenario-based modeling that we discussed. It's an interactive document, so as there's conversation, I can adjust, move targets, change levy scenarios. But I've got three kind of built to discuss, and hopefully there can be some direction from that conversation this evening. Also, I know last year was the first time that we modeled out median home value changes based off of levy changes as well, right? Because there's other things that go into the change to taxes, fiscal disparity sharing. So I got that information at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. We're supposed to have it a little earlier today from Ramsey County, but we've got it. But I haven't been able to kind of develop any of those scenarios or models yet. So once I'm able to have some more time with that data, hopefully I can bring that forward just to provide context around impact to median home values. So that is to come, but we will work on that. So with that, I will share my screen. Like I said, I've got three flavors of scenarios to discuss, or at least look at, and we can kind of adjust from there. So I'll jump into that right now. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Yell at me if you can. So the three scenarios I built essentially was a scenario with no actions taken, what the levy would need to support that. And so we've got 2021, but also kind of a 2022 model for comparison as well. It's not fully built out, doesn't have staff input, but just this conversation and direction. I've also got another model, which is an attempt to keep the levy under or around 5% per year increase around that. And then another model that's got some significant decreases and what that could potentially look like as well. So this is essentially the same document that we looked at before, but just real quickly, I'm going to go back to the top. So in this scenario, carrying everything forward that we discussed before, I do have a small contingency line items in both here. And in part of that, just the preface is we don't have all the input back from the departments yet. So I think this number could come down a little bit, but I just want to preface that first, that department budgets are due tomorrow. So there's a small placeholder in there for that. This also includes the 2 programs that I talked about earlier that the city would start setting aside some dollars for tax appeals. Like I said, at the end of the year last year, we had $56,000 of funding being withheld by Ramsey County for pending tax appeals. I only anticipate that to continue to increase as market values continue to increase. The assumption, and Ramsey County's confirmed that the appeal process is going to continue. So we've got that, and then also this 0.5% of payroll for severance. We discussed that before. The city doesn't set aside dollars for vacated positions when there's payouts for severance. Potentially funding these, setting aside some dollars for this could expedite the process of backfilling positions. If we don't do that, there's potential for delays in filling those positions. So, and also we do have a couple of additional expenses that have been identified from contractual things. Dispatch services by Ramsey County is at $9,832, $8,500 of elections to the elections contract with Ramsey County. And then I've also got a placeholder for $4,000. The merchant processing process, not to get too in depth in this, with the permitting, licensing, and code enforcement product that's being purchased through OpenGov. I think there's going to be a real effort from staff to promote that. And of course, the merchant processing fees associated with online payments and credit card payments will be there. I don't know what that number is, but we are putting a small placeholder in there for that. Obviously, if that program's more readily utilized. So some assumptions in here to scrub down, but for discussion purposes, it's about $596,000 that the levy would need to go up. And that equates to about 10.86% levy increase year over year. And then following up on that again, the next year into 2022, with some assumptions made, it's about 8.3% or $505,000. So that's assuming no actions taken, that staffing, personnel, programming, everything continues the way that it has. And those are the increases, we're kind of ballparking that would be needed to sustain the city. I'll continue. The next model is in an attempt to try and keep the levy at or around below 5% year over year. So same assumptions being built into this model. The restructuring that's been discussed is I highlighted here in row 47, about $430,000. So if that was taken into account, and if council passed a 4.5% levy increase, that would result in an over levy of about $80,000. That over levy would be carried into the subsequent year. Again, assumptions are being made here, assumptions for loss of LGA funding, a small contingency. So there's some assumptions built into 2021. We'd carry that $80,000 forward. There'd be a gap of about $488,000. We'd apply $80,000 to that. There's a potential $126,000 that's being allocated to the Asset Preservation Fund, or the old LGA fund, annually. That could be removed. And then if council, theoretically, with a 4.91% levy increase, would get the levy balanced into the following year, into 2022. And then the final scenario I have, I'm going to just scroll up to the top here. We've removed the severance program from that line item there to remove that. And then this is for, obviously we can move some of this around, but again, utilizing the restructuring that's been identified, removing the LGA allocations to street maintenance and to the asset preservation fund, and also removing the contracted mowing would result in a 4.71, theoretically a 4.71% levy decrease. Coming back the following year, if all those actions were taken, it would require about a 9.33% increase into the following year, a levy increase of 9.33. Of course, this could be redistributed to balance, so it'd be closer to a 0 and a smaller number in the subsequent year. So again, theoretically, again, we don't have all the facts for this year, but to kind of create a theoretical baseline. The one thing I want to discuss too is really quick, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much about this because I want to allow council to have discussion, but I know there's been conversation about the utilization of CARES funding. And the only thing I want to note with that, and the reason why in this model I identified taking LGA dollars and pulling them back is because the thought that if you're living off of reserves, and that's kind of essentially what this would be, right? We'd have the CARES money go into our fund balance and we'd use it in subsequent years. By doing that, it looks like we're living off of basically fund balance, which to rating agencies, when we issue bonds, Standard & Poor's provides a rating, they do monitoring of that rating, and if we issue new bonds, of course, they'll do another rating. The risk there is if we're living off of fund balance, which would be about 5 or 6%, the question comes up as they say, how are you going to sustain this, right? If you're living off of fund balance, it's a conversation, and what I want to try and do is remove that from the equation, that if we have monitoring or the city continues to issue bonds for these reconstruction projects, that reallocating LGA is just reallocating existing revenue, where if you're in essence living off of fund balance, it creates a lot of concern when you have those calls. So that's kind of the theory behind this. I can explain that further if there's more questions, but that's essentially why the $300,000 is a reallocation of LGA and not utilizing those CARES dollars. So with that, I don't know, Mayor, if you'd like me to stop presenting for conversation, then I can pull it back up so you can see everyone, or if you want me to stay in this environment for questioning.
Why don't you go ahead and just stay in this for right now. Is there any questions for Jason at this point? Councilmember Sonic.
Yeah, so Jason, how would we use the CARES Act funding otherwise? What would the plan be for that money?
Yeah, Councilmember Sonic. So I think there's a couple ways to take it. So if you remember last year or earlier this year, no, at the end of last year, excuse me, council passed a resolution to modify the fund balance policy. So before there's a 25% fund balance policy, now it's 35 to 50. We're not there. So essentially, if these CARES dollars roll over into our fund balance, it still doesn't put us at the minimum threshold that was passed. So that would work towards that minimum threshold that was passed, or in a scenario like this, you could take that $600, whatever is remaining from some of the actions to be taken and things that have been done, take those dollars and then put them one time into street maintenance or into the LGA fund. Council has those options.
So the idea is if it goes to this fund balance, you're basically just tucking it away, and then you don't have to take as much out of your general fund balance to move it over on an annual basis to build that fund balance.
Yeah, Councilmember Sonic. Yeah, that's basically it. It's going to get us closer to that target quicker.
Well, how much would we have allocated to reallocate to that reserve fund balance in 2021? Was that accounted for already?
Just to clarify the question, so is the question how close we are to that minimum fund balance?
So we have that fund balance that we want to maintain, and we increased the dollar level that we wanted that to be at. So in order to build that fund, how were we doing that? Were we allocating so much per year from our general fund into that reserve fund? Yeah,
so the theory is that any, if revenues are greater than expenditures, it just continues to flow into itself.
So that's the only way we were accounting for that, to create that cushion, was just from net gains from revenue.
Correct.
Okay. So it wasn't a line item that we had where we are reallocating funds on an annual basis.
Correct.
I got a quick question. Can you scroll up here and get up to the top on this current tab and see, okay. So then, okay, so the 2021 proposed expenses there in D3, if you scroll back down now, you've made that potential staff restructuring, you've plugged that number in there, okay? And, you know, I thought that the last meeting we asked for what a 5% would look like and then what a 0% would look like. I mean, I understand on here you got it at a negative 4.7. But at any rate, I just wanted to see those numbers up. I mean, this is difficult when we typically don't have things to look at beforehand and kind of review. So bear with me as we're trying to think on the fly here. But I'd like to jump back to your comment about, you know, the CARES funding and how potentially, you know, on bond calls, they could look like if we did say, hey, look, let's just, you know, to help prevent any levy increase in this year and next year, and potentially in 2023, let's just take that 900,000 divided over the next 3 years. So now we're dealing with an extra 300,000 each year to help supplement our general fund. And you're saying, well, that could be looked at negatively because they're saying, well, that's not a sustainable thing. That's a temporary thing. But do they also take into a consideration, well, you also made this major staff restructuring. You know, the general fund was reduced in 2021 by 430,000 and that carries over. I mean, that it's not just a one-time thing, right?
Yeah, Councilmember Thorson, I think that, again, the way they view that, though, is a one-time thing. That there is some incremental savings from COLAs and cost of living and step increases in the future. But if you're using those dollars for operational costs,
Yeah, but those operational costs have gone away. We no longer have this $430,000 expense any longer. We've eliminated that. And unless we replace those positions the following year, I don't see how that assumption can just be made, well, that's a one-time adjustment. That's a one-time thing. It carries forward. If we're spending $5 million in 2020 and we reduce $1 million moving forward, we're spending $4 million in 2021. All things being equal, we're spending $4 million in 2022. I mean, and I get it. There's a certain percentage, roughly 4.5% increase from year to year in the COLA adjustments, but I don't follow that logic where we're saying in that E47, here's a one-time 430 adjustment, and then next year it's gone, and now we're looking at, we got to increase the levy by 9.3% to make up for that.
I know it's a drag, but that's how that works. I mean, you get a one-time, I mean, of course your budget is lower, but you're losing all those services. It's the way our budget at my job works is the same thing. So when you save money on this year's budget, people like that, but now your budget next year is compared to where you ended up this year. So I could have my team come under budget by thousands of dollars. Well, now that's the new normal. So now if it goes up by $1,000 next year, that means my budget, I increase my budget, even though compared to 2 years ago, it's still lower. So you only get that benefit once. So you can take away all these positions and then you get this savings. And granted, it's a savings that you'll continue to have because then your overall general fund is lower. But the problem is that the next year, then you will end up doing an increase from where the new baseline that you've created.
Yeah, and that's at 4.5%, not 430,000.
Right. That's
how
right.
How do we jump from? And again, I'm not looking at this full thing, but if what's being proposed here, and again, maybe it's because this decrease is throwing it off, but if this was at 0 instead of a negative 4% levy, what if it was just a 0% increase? And see, now that jumped up.
So,
How do you have a negative levy increase in 1 year and then the next year, or we just made a change to 0? So instead of reducing the levy 4%, we just held it at 0. That number jumped up $500,000. See, something's not right. There must be some formula in some field here that's not tying.
yeah,
Because I had that happen when you emailed this previous thing last Wednesday, and I dropped in, instead of what you did, you dropped it in this E46. If you scroll up to the top, I just reduced that D3 cell by roughly 432. If you do that, if you take that number and you drop in 4,553,008, watch what happens to column H. It just jumps like $600,000. That's not right. Because I think that cell is tied to something that's not. Click
Right,
on
yeah.
cell 8. Click on
right,
cell.
Councilmember Thorson, you're correct that
So
the way this,
Why don't we have Jason, why don't you go ahead and finish trying to figure out what he's trying to talk about there, and then Scott, you can follow up.
so you're correct that part of this is the way the formula is driven is that in one of these examples, it's carrying forward any unspent balance. So what I've tried to do is normalize the data to say, right, this is where we're at, and then come to the bottom and take actions. So essentially what this is saying is that if you reduce the levy now is 5,232,676. Then you come back the next year and you need to add $488,000. That's a 9.33% increase.
and we're adding 488, 469 because
Right.
we're
So
taking-
right. So there's personnel pieces,
And
the debt
the-
portion,
okay.
and then an assumption that
That we're
LGA
losing
could be cut
LGA.
again.
Okay. And then there's some changes in the revenues,
Correct.
and that's not change. But now again, why wouldn't we make these same assumptions here that are in box 49E and 50E? Again,
Those are one-time things. You can't keep cutting. It's gone. You can't. It's already been moved out. That's the new baseline.
yeah, I get that.
So you can't cut it again.
A scenario of if in theory we were to make a policy or make the decision to say we got this one-time CARES funding that's having an impact on the budget, we can't ignore that unless we just say we're not going to use any of that money to pay for anything. But then what are we going to use the money for? Okay.
So yeah, so like I said, it theoretically it would roll into our fund balance, and we could revise the fund balance policy to change that. And yeah, you certainly could utilize the money here if you wanted.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, I mean, I just was confused. They were saying, well, we can't do that, but we can.
Sure.
You're just saying, well, maybe it's not best policy because we run
Right.
into issues with the bond rating and stuff, but I don't know. It just seems like there's a little more there because I'd be interested to know, like, what other sorts of things would they view negatively on in our budget that we're currently doing, and I would imagine transferring money from the enterprise fund into the general fund to pay for normal reoccurring general fund expenses would be one, right? But we
Yeah,
do
so
that. But we do that because we need to, right? Because that's just how our general fund is set up. We have to supplement that through transfers from the enterprise fund into the general fund. That's just always how we've operated, and we've tried to wean that down. LGA would be another one. We could just allocate 100% of LGA to supplement our general fund, and we have for many years, but we've gotten away from that. So would they look at that as well? That's your budget you're presenting here is a little too reliant on LGA funds. What if LGA is reduced like what we're seeing? Is that going to be negatively viewed by the bond ratings? I'm sure it will be. I mean, I get what you're saying. We want to try to avoid it, but I have a hard time justifying a levy increase if we have an opportunity here, albeit a one-time thing, to say, well, we're not going to do any of that because we run the risk of this, but we're already engaged in activities that run that risk. And I don't see how they could ignore, we made a huge cut to our general fund operating levy by reducing some staff restructuring. How could that not come into play in consideration? It's not just we're rolling along here and we're trying to, patch a leak here with temporary funding. We've made an adjustment to the budget that's significant. And, I don't see how we can't plug that in and view it, because what the picture you're painting here is if we do a zero levy or a negative levy next year, we're looking at a 10% increase, and that's not necessarily the case, right? I mean, there's other scenarios that we can get that down.
Councilmember Sonic.
I'd like to change the subject, if I might, on the staff restructuring piece that we're looking at here. Just some general concerns there based on some of that information that city manager had sent related to this. I have concerns about staff restructuring to that level, just because, the number one issue we brought up with the city manager in his annual review was the concern about delegation and his need to delegate more and not take on too much responsibility himself. And I'm concerned that if we eliminate positions that take burden off of him now, that he ends up being stretched even thinner in that way. And the other thing is, it may be, restructuring is one way to say it, because what this is looking at is not really restructuring, but just reductions. Restructuring you could think of as saying, well, we think maybe this position isn't as valuable to us, but we have needs elsewhere, and we could restructure and move those those human resource dollars elsewhere to cover some other needs that we have. So I'm concerned about that level of cutting in our staff. And I think I would also like to hear from city manager and what you are hearing from your directors about where we need to invest. I mean, I think that there has to be some balance here with how we approach our budget, even when times are tough. You can't just do nothing but cut. There has to be some areas where you're saying these are things that where we really need help. What about code enforcement? What do we have enough patrol officers right now? What about just office needs in terms of like handling HR related things, all of those types of things. And I don't know if, our public works, we've always said with public works, we can just, depends on what level of service you're comfortable with, so we could cut that department in half, right? But then things just wouldn't happen the way that we're used to them happening. The streets wouldn't be plowed as quickly, things wouldn't be done. And I think, there are, as it is right now, it seems like it takes a while for some things to get done because of where we're at with public works. Should we be reallocating more people into that area? I'm just throwing that out as an example, but I'm curious, City Manager Dudek, what your thoughts are there as far as investment. You're on mute.
Scott, you're muted.
Tom, there's no question about, these are, just as you said it bluntly, this is not much of a restructuring at all. This is cut. At this level, these are significant personnel cuts that would have to be made at levels throughout the organization. And from my standpoint, this has nothing to do with line items. This has nothing to do with operational supplies, nothing like that. Year after year, we've continued to chip away and look at those and make sure that they're very lean. And that's why there's no room to do anything other than in personnel at this point. And, maintaining those day-to-day operations, and it's very important to me that we're able to continue to do our street maintenance work. These maintenance overlays, I think, are a real necessity that we're able to continue those into the future and buy us many years, because we're going to have to really scale back on our complete road reconstruction projects. Minimally, we're going to have to shrink them in size, just because of the overall cost there, and also being conscious with the health of our utility funds, water, sewer, storm sewer, things like that. So we're going to have to really be conscious of where the projects are done, so that we don't go on a heavy project with utilities that are suffering now, and we have no room to increase those rates. Those rates are already significantly high. We're short on revenues to be able to do projects, so that's important. But the other thing is being able to maintain personnel in the field to maintain our operations out there. We've got a huge investment coming into our community, $100 million of investment coming in with housing and things. And we owe it to the developers coming in, and I will not give up on that we turn a blind eye to them that are investing in our community, and that we continue to maintain things in and around our community for that support. If we have to make these cuts on personnel, they're going to have to be very strategic in doing so, and it's going to be definitely a big change, but it's something we'll have to live within.
Yeah, and if I can just quick dovetail off of these comments here, in all my conversations with Scott about these aren't, this is not, of course, we would love to just continue on. We don't want to make cuts. And these positions are, there in theory to add a higher level of service, and that's what we're always striving for. But, you're back in that share screen, Jason. Can you go back to the original do nothing scenario up in, the main levy drivers tab on just if we did nothing? I mean, we're talking about a 10.8% increase in the levy. So if we just said, yep, we've gone through, everything is a necessity, we cannot cut anywhere. Are we seriously going to look at raising the levy 10.86% this year, given everything that's gone on in the climate of the economy, given the fact that Ramsey County has hit North St. Paul disproportionately to other communities that we've seen in the market value increases?
I don't think anybody's suggesting that.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to continue.
Go ahead, Scott.
No one is. So we have to look at this so I look at this slide and it's just kind of, hey, FYI, the worst case scenario, if we decided we weren't going to do anything, this is what we're doing. But this is not reality here, this slide here. We have to make changes. And that's where we get into that other slide of 5% or 0%. And even that is, still some significant cuts in staff restructuring or whatever you want to call it. Those positions, from my understanding, have been very carefully looked at, and the thought is, unfortunately, we can do away with these positions and still maintain a high level of service because they aren't looking at, well, let's just cut half of public works. That's not what this is. Let's just cut half of the patrol officers in the police department. That's not what this is. Majority of these positions are positions that staff has identified as we can eliminate these and continue to operate. And so to that, it's more of well, times are tough now. Every other businesses have been closed, businesses have been affected. We can't just continue to turn to the taxpayer and just say, well, you're suffering, you're going to have to suck it up a little more because we don't want to tighten our belt here. And, when I look at that scenario, that 0 to 5% is what we're looking at. How do you get away from those staff modifications or adjustments. You can't. And this is that time where we're going to have to make these difficult decisions. I mean, we haven't done it in the past. You can say, I brought it up last meeting. Is everything on the table? We were told yes. And the comments were, well, every year it's on the table. But what year, again, I point to, when did we actually ever make cuts outside of someone retiring and we don't fill the position? We never have. And this is the year now it's come to reality. That's a combination of all these things. And to just say, well, let's not do that. Well, then why are we having the conversation? We should just say, well, we're going to look at another 10% levy increase, another 8% next year, because we're not willing to go over how we function and look at, well, these positions here that we've highlighted, they're not non-essential, but we can do without them and still operate at a high level. And that's how I interpret this.
Councilmember Sonic.
Yeah, I just don't view this as an all or nothing situation. I don't think we accept a 10.6% increase or a 4.57% decrease. I don't think it has to be all or nothing. I don't think anyone is suggesting that this starting point is where we should just be comfortable with and we should go with it. But I also don't think we have to say all of those positions that were identified should just automatically be removed either. I think there could be, there's a balance in here somewhere. And I think that balance could involve some restructuring and not just reduction. So there's somewhere in between here. And I don't think we have to, I don't think, Councilmember Thorson, that anything that you see here needs to be taken as like, well, this is what it is. I don't think we're all just looking at this to work our way through it. And I think this original view that we're looking at here was just a starting point, especially because of the fact that we hadn't even considered anything where we might need to add spending. So if you were gonna add from here, then you would have to have even other reductions. So that's where I think, I just want to get back to the conversation of what is the balanced approach that we can take to looking at this thing without having to, to hurt the level of service too much and without having to increase the levy too much.
Jason, you want to show that other, slow that other slide, I don't know if the council wants to see either one of those two other slides. We've been staying on this one, but if the other slide has any benefit to people for conversation.
I was going to say too, I can't see Jan or Candy, so if you guys have a question, just jump in. Go ahead, Jason.
Is this slide we're looking at here, this tab, okay, this is a 4.5% levy increase, and that still includes 430,000 reduction, right?
Correct.
That's correct, Councilmember Thorson. Yeah, the effort here, and again, this is preliminary because we don't really have a 2-year budget, but this was kind of an attempt to try and keep things under 5% annually. So there is an excess of $80,000, or about $81,000 here that would be subsequently rolled over to the next year. But again, in an effort just to try and even out that levy.
Jason, is there any funds or any expenses in this that are part of the CARES Act, or there's nothing in there?
Oh, correct, Mayor. There isn't anything in here related to that. So,
And then just, so at maybe next Tuesday, are we going to have further discussion on the CARES Act? And we can't just, I mean, we got to, and I get it, we have to make a decision on how we're going to do that, right? What are we going to do with that money? And I think we as a council need to discuss that, because as Councilmember Sonic pointed out, if we're not comfortable with these reductions in staffing, then that's going to have to come into play. Because even in this scenario at 4.5%, this is that full reduction in that staffing at 430. So even if we pulled half of that out, now that's going to be probably closer to 6, 7, 8%. Is it not? I mean, I can't play with the numbers there to find out, but so I think to move forward, it's a one-time thing. I get that. And it's probably not a good idea to try to, use that as a Band-Aid, but if that's our only option and that helps keep things level, then I think it's on us to consider that seriously. But also, if we're not going to do that, then we need to come up with clear direction on what we're going to use that money for. And it can just be something that we say, well, we'll figure out a plan, and then you blink and it's 6 months later, and then we get time to talk about it, and then next thing you know, a year goes by and that money is still just sitting somewhere. I mean, I think we have to have clear direction, a path, and a plan for that this year and how we're going to deal with that. And obviously we've got time here. We can't do that tonight, but I hope that's going to be discussed at some point.
Councilmember Sonic.
Yeah, in the spirit of the CARES Act, is there not something that it would be reasonable to allocate some of those funds to, even if it were just a one-year thing? I mean, Jason, I'm thinking what your concern is it more that if we were to allocate, say $300,000 a year from CARES Act money to help pay for general fund needs, that would look like a reliance on reserve funds. But if in the spirit of the CARES Act, we're using it to help us get through the pandemic and the additional costs that are incurred there, is there something that we could even take part of that for this year to help pay for some increased costs and then roll the rest into the reserve fund?
Yeah, Councilmember Sonic, one other thing I just want to touch on real quick about Councilmember Thorson's question about the bond rating process and all that information, the exercise we went through, I think back in March or April, city manager, I can't remember when that was, when we issued bonds, that report is on the finance webpage of the city. So if you care to look at how that's evaluated and the inputs that go into that is located out there. So I can send that link out as well. Yeah, I think your question, Councilmember Sonic, so not to get too long-winded here, but there's an action item for council this evening at the city council meeting that essentially identifies how the CARES funding is going to be claimed. So it's you have to claim expenses against it, and basically for administrative purposes, they can say all public safety expenses can be used to be claimed against it, right? So we have enough public safety expenditures. Theoretically, we take the dollars in, and then that's we've claimed them. Now we can spend the dollars as we deem needed. So I think the issue that it runs into, though, is that really those dollars end up having to be used for large capital type expenditures if they're going to be used, or as we said, you run the risk of using them, basically using fund balance. Again, it can be done. Other cities have done it. They do it. I'm just trying to alert council to the potential risk or a potential outcome of doing that. But it's, council can do it, and they're not prohibited from doing it. I just, want to make sure that that's brought up.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like if we're remove the allocation of LGA to asset preservation fund or something like that. I mean, if that were used in 2021. And I don't know, maybe, and we start to piece together some other dollars, but if we were using it that way, or, just used it to help pay for that allocation to the asset preservation fund.
Yeah, Councilmember Sonic, that's exactly kind of the method here, is to say, we'll take the LGA dollars, instead of shifting them over to those other funds, we'll keep them in the general fund, and then we'll take that, you could take the 600 or whatever's left of the CARES dollars, plug those gaps in those other funds. But again, I think the question becomes, right, sustainability or long-term, what's going to happen with what was funded previously. So that's exactly what, I'm glad you hit on that, because I may not have done a good job of explaining that. That's kind of what this is trying to demonstrate.
And I think where we want to be with this is to give a percentage increase, or or 0, whatever that number is, between the 0 and 5, and give that to staff, and that's our starting point. And from there, once we set it, we can't increase it, but we can decrease it, correct? Jason?
Yeah, Mayor, that's correct.
That's correct.
You know, so if we do set something at some point here, it's whatever council is comfortable with. And from that number, we can either keep it the same or try to reduce it.
So we could recommend a 5% increase and then have you could hash it out for the next couple of months to get it down. You could have a decrease.
Basically, and we've got to set something by the end of September. So we need some number to set by the end of September to certify to the county. And then between that time and December,
Right.
we can come down.
So we got time.
So next Tuesday, we have, it's pretty much a budget, Scott?
Next Tuesday will be allocated to budget only. We have no time constraint with that. So that meeting to begin at 5 o'clock. And basically we have whatever time necessary for that.
Okay.
And Mayor, I'll point out, I can get this out, and Councilmember Thorson, I apologize for any struggles or anything that may be wrong with the file, but I'll get this out, and if you have questions or want to call me directly, we can model this and you know, put in any scenarios or anything that you'd like to see happen prior to that. I'm definitely more than willing to do that, so please just let me know.
Yeah, and I'll throw that out again to all that, you know, anybody, council or other, I mean, please feel free to talk with Jason directly so that you get all your questions answered. We want to make sure that everybody is comfortable and has all the information to make the decisions.
Councilmember Sonic?
Yeah, City Manager Dudek, I would just ask, I would like to know what is it going to look like for the city, given some of these changes. So if we reduce certain staff, what do we lose from it? So how would things be different? Because right now it's easy to just look at these things as just a bunch of numbers, and wouldn't it be great to save $430,000? But what does that mean? What does that look like to the residents?
Right, and the number to have to work within. I mean, there's been all sorts of hypothetical, you know, what ifs. But if this is the structure that we're going to have to live within, then we're going to we'll begin that process in making concrete recommendations on moving forward and starting that process to make those corrections or that restructuring or staff reductions. But within, you can see this $430,000, and even with that, with the levy increase, there's not a lot of choice not to do those things. And I can certainly put together a plan and a memo to outline your question for that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I mean, because otherwise, I mean, if we don't think we're going to lose much, then by all means. But it just seems like there must be some value that we're getting from all of these
Sure.
roles.
Yep.
Well, I know the last meeting, it was asked for direction on a levy and what direction to go. And it seems to be the same question. I think I've made myself pretty clear in the past, but I'll do it again and say it now. I strongly encourage or think we should strive for a 0% levy. And the reason why is because of all the circumstances surrounding this year. I just think it's appropriate not to increase the levy again and just leave it at that. And we'll have continued discussion, but that's where I'm at. I strongly would encourage a 0% levy and support a 0% levy as the goal to strive towards.
Okay. Councilmember Peterson or Walzak, any comment?
Yeah, I agree with Scott. I want to see a 0 budget too. The times probably dictate that, and I think that's what we should all strive for. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Okay. So next week we'll have a full workshop for the budget. And again, if you got any questions, reach out to Jason because he's got a lot of work involved in this. You got to look at present and future too. So I believe anybody else have anything else to say, or Jan, you got anything, or? Okay. All right. So tough times right now. I know the budget is a tough process. Jason, thank you very much for all your effort and time into this, and we'll go from there. So Scott, we have our work cut out for you and staff.
We'll get it done.
All right, so at this time, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Sonic,
Second.
second by Councilmember Walzak. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Go ahead, Mary, take the roll.
Councilmember Thorson,
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson,
Aye.
Councilmember Walzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Sonic,
Aye.
Mayor Furlong. And before anyone leaves, I want to know who made the second. I thought it was Councilmember Peterson. Was it?
Yes, it was.
To adjourn. It was Peterson. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
All right.
we'll see you in a few minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.